It's one thing to drop off to sleep at night, confident of waking up in the daylight. It's quite another to drop off to sleep in death and have any confidence in waking up anywhere. I mean, where could we possibly wake? The manipulation of the idea of an afterlife has been mercilessly used to sedate and subdue those who are having no life to speak of now. It's also been used to anesthetize the numbing fear of nothingness. All 5 big religions have views on the afterlife. The views on show today are Buddhist and Christian. Christians first. The Christian consensus appears to suggest that we have one life, which raises the question, then what? 2,000 years of busybodies, some of them mighty geniuses, have presumed to look past death and envisage resting places. Pleasant for the godly, that's heaven. Nasty for the downright evil, that's hell. But why not just say, it's all very mysterious, and concentrate on this life while you have it? Or isn't that Christian?
If sin is seen to be a personal, private matter which God is going to punish, then God is judge, and heaven and hell will all figure largely. But if you're talking about a God of love, a God of forgiveness, where punishment is not the thing one wants to say about God, then heaven and hell are not the primary things one has to dangle before people's eyes.
Doesn't the church sometimes manipulate the afterlife to keep stragglers in line?
Oh, I think it certainly used to. It used to try and harry the people into the kingdom of God by fear. But again, if you're talking about a God of love and a God of forgiveness, you can't make fear the primary motive for believing in God.
I know somebody who in their childhood was terrified by somebody telling him about hell. I mean, that seems to me to be absolutely anti-Christian to terrify a child.
The notions of hell were always of eternity. I mean, you never got out of it. And it wasn't supposed to do you any good. It was just that you suffered forever and ever and ever. And the notion of God that it conveyed was quite appalling. So I'm pleased, for my part, that notions of hell in that sense have quite gone by the board in most churches.
Tomb inscriptions can throw light on the Christian vision of the afterlife. Do you have a favorite?
Yes, I remember seeing once in one churchyard a tombstone that began, "Here lieth all that could die of," and then the name of the person.
So what can't die?
Well, what people used to think that what couldn't die was what they called a soul, which was an immaterial something you certainly couldn't discover by dissecting a corpse or even a living person, but was nevertheless a real thing inside us which was imperishable. But increasingly, belief in the soul has fallen out of use, and yet people still want to say that there is something in us to which God can relate, and relate eternally, that it is not destroyed at death.
What do you think happens when you die?
I don't know is the only honest answer.
Thought you'd have it.
Yes, what I think all Christians rely on finally is their trust in God, that if you believe in a God of love and a God of forgiveness, then this life is not all, and one can go on trusting God through death and into whatever happens next. And again, for Christians, in the traditional belief about the resurrection of Jesus Christ is, as it were, a foretaste and a demonstration of what may happen.
So are you talking about what's sometimes called dying well?
Yes, dying well is trusting God with whatever is going to happen, not thinking that everything is lost, not holding on to the world as if it were the only thing there is.
But isn't it best not to talk about things we can't possibly know?
Well, I think so. I don't think one can say anything really clear about life after death. For one thing, there will be no time and no space. And yet all our thinking is in terms of time and space. That's why heaven sometimes seems boring, because people think it's endless time. But whatever it is, it's not that. So perhaps we should have it as a thing we believe in, and yet not try to be too precise about our beliefs.
So we're talking about two views, like a nursery school view, which has got heaven, pleasant place, hell, nasty place, say, whatever it be. And then above that, a more sophisticated view that doesn't deal in picture language so much.
That would be fair enough. And in a sense, I suppose there is nothing wrong with the nursery school view. If that comforts people, if it directs them, it's fine. But if you try to think about it too hard, it dissolves into nonsense. So that we are driven to this more general, but still trusting notion of God.
When a few years ago, one of the newspapers did a survey on belief in reincarnation, it was discovered that a large minority of the population, and not just the Buddhists, expected it. Right or wrong, the idea of reincarnation has customer appeal, which takes us to our next encounter. All Buddhist traditions see birth and death as rebirth and redeath, on, endlessly recycled. Some forms of Buddhism sketch sensational journeys from the moment of death to the next birth, but all agree that we are reborn and we re-die. Nirvana, a word sometimes mistakenly twinned with heaven, awaits only those who have woken up as the Buddha woke up, beyond the opposites of pain and pleasure, youth and age, rebirth and re-death, nirvana. For the rest of us, though, it's safe to assume that the life we're in isn't our first, and it won't, by any means, be our last.
Life is a conglomeration of forces, physical and mental. What we say death is the non-function of the physical side. But the mental side, the mental qualities do not die with non-functioning of the body. They find expressions in other forms. And in other words, we will born again.
Immediately born again.
Immediately. There's no gap in between death and birth.
And will we be reborn as a human being, or maybe as something else?
It depends according to the thought that occurs at death of dying person. And if the thoughts are good, the person will be born in a place of happiness. If thoughts are wicked or bad, the person will be born in place of unhappiness. That's how it happens.
Now, is there a soul that survives from one life to the next?
There is no soul coming in Buddhism whatsoever.
So what does connect one life with the next life? I've heard the word karma used.
Yes.
Is that the right word for your actions in one life?
Not in one life. Karma means the actions. Physical actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. All these are producing certain forces that helps us to continue this life as well as life hereafter.
So this is the strand that goes from one life to the next, the strand of the pile-up of your thoughts and actions.
We don't say that goes from one life to the other, because our being here causes to be again. Cause and effect. Action and results. That's how we look at it. Nothing goes from here to next life. But our being here causes, it becomes a cause to be again.
Now, most people are used to, whether they're Christian or not, the idea of a heaven, if you're lucky, a place of reward. Now, is that what nirvana is?
Now, nirvana cannot be similarized with Christian heaven, because heaven is to be gained or to be born in heaven after death.
Oh, explain that.
Nirvana is not a place or heaven, it is not a land, and it is wisdom, knowledge, liberation and freedom from desire, freedom from craving, and freedom from greediness, and freedom from hatred, and freedom from illusion or delusion. Nirvana is ultimate in Buddhistic expression, and that is the ultimate we are hoping or we are wishing, or we are willing to achieve, as it is ultimate, not possible for a person to express it fully satisfactorily, because it is ultimate, beyond our expressions, beyond our words.
Can you experience nirvana in this life?
Exactly. It is to be experienced in this life while living. It is not something after death. It is to be experienced while living, because it is realization. We say, another word is enlightenment, another word is understanding, another word is wisdom, the highest form of wisdom.
You say freedom from desire, freedom from clinging, freedom from this, that, and the other, but every part of our life is to do with clinging, desiring, wanting, isn't it? I mean, nirvana, as you talk about it, seems to be separate from our lives.
Yes, it is not the life.
Inhuman.
Well, it is to be realized by a human. But it is not a life to live. It is not a death either. It is free from life and death.
Very hard.
Well, that is ultimate. Ultimate is hard.
If anyone becomes worried or perplexed thinking about death and rebirth, what do you advise them to do?
What they have to do is to do something pleasant and wholesome, skillful things, because they know this is not the end, that death is not the end of their continuity, and they will be born again. And therefore, it is they take it as a natural thing, normal thing to happen, not only to human beings, to any beings, and to any things. It is the process of change, and we are subject to that process of change. We are changing all the time.
Aren't ideas of the afterlife in either Buddhism or Christianity simply ploys, psychological ploys, to take the sting out of death? Could I ask you first?
Well, one can say so, one can think in that way, but to us, it is not a psychological ploy, because there is life after death in Buddhism. And some can be born in place of extremely happy, and some can be born in place of extremely unhappy, depending on their lifestyle that they live here. And therefore it is an encouragement to people to lead a good life, because they will enjoy their next life.
Dr. Page, how about you?
Well, I think it may satisfy some of our psychological longings, but if it does, that's still no argument that it doesn't exist. I mean, it would be one of the things that a religion would do as a byproduct, if the religion were a religion one could believe in, that it would have these psychological pieces of assistance. Any religion without any psychological assistance would hardly be credible. So it may indeed do that, but that is a quite separate question from whether or not there is an afterlife.
About your very absolute views on no heaven, no hell, I've seen paintings of Buddhist devils, Buddhist heavens, Buddhist hells. Now, where are these? Are they in your imagination, or are they in some place?
Well, I don't say, or in Buddhism it is not said that there is no heaven, no hell. We say divine planes where beings can be born, and also hell, not one thing, we say purgatories, where beings can be born according to their bad deeds.
Existing alongside the worlds we have.
And it is difficult for us to say where these are located. Even in Christianity, you have these angels, and where are they? In the same way that we Buddhists also don't know where these heavenly existence.
That there are realms of something.
There are realms. Apart from this human realm, there are many realms, divine realms, and higher divine realms, what we say Brahma realms, and also we can see that animal kingdom, and also there are beings, though we cannot see them, many invisible beings are around us.
It's very tough for us because are human beings born in these hells or living in these hells alongside living in life?
And we, not human beings, any being can be born in those places.
So
After their death, not as a human being they live there,
not as a human being.
not as a human being.
I see. But can you be a human being reborn into one of those places?
Yes, that's it.
Ah, I understand that. Now, listening to what you have about the Buddhist point of view, I mean, do you think that Pandit Vajrayana has any place in heaven, Christian heaven?
Now, there's something in the Christian beliefs that I haven't heard at all in what you've been describing, and that's the notion of forgiveness and acceptance. If I have understood you correctly, you're saying that the way you live now gives rise to the next life that you will have.
Yeah.
What Christians say is that the way we live now can never be the way we should live, but that God forgives and accepts us, even though we are not acceptable. And that's true of everyone. And there is no one in that case who is outside God's concern, God's love. But I don't want to make it seem as if Christianity could take over Buddhism just like that. I'm not trying to make a takeover bid by saying it, but it's implicit in my belief, my Christian belief in God, that God is concerned and forgiving and supportive of everyone, without exception.
But in Buddhism, there is no one to let one to be born in divine realm or in purgatories. And also those places are not eternal. Temporarily they live there and they go on according to the results of their deeds, what they did. As we human beings, we are not here permanently, and we live here for some time and then we leave. In the same way, those beings who are born in those places live as long as that karmic force which gave them birth lasts. Then they have to go on.
But the karmic force is something they have created themselves from how they have lived.
Yes, yes.
Yes, we don't have anything like that.
Yes, and in the same way that we don't have anything to be judged by a supreme God.
Don't you think those of us in a Christian background are sometimes bedeviled by the endless paternal metaphors, everlasting arms, various sorts of comfort, whereas I get the feeling that you have found a way of being an orphan. You jolly well look after yourself.
Well, we Buddhists rely our own deeds, our own thoughts to us. That's why people have created a God, to lean on to him.
I think that's certainly possible. There are two extremes that Christianity can go to. One is this stern sovereign judge, and it doesn't matter whether you've been good or bad, God decides. And in reaction to that, you can go to the other extreme and have this all-forgiving Father for whom it doesn't matter again what you have done. Christianity, when it is really considered, has both the notion that what you do matters at every moment, and the thought that God is both judge and compassionate Father. That God suffers as the world suffers. That God did not create the world to then let it go on in its own misery, but that God suffers with the world in its misery.
I want to pick you up on something you said in our earlier talk, which was that your next birth would be decided by the thought you're having at the moment of death. If a very good man, happened to whatever, stub his toe at the moment of death and swear, he's having a negative thought. And if a thief suddenly feels pleasant and has a good thought, do they then reverse places karmically, losing all the credits they've built up during their different good and bad lives?
When someone is born according to the last thought, it is not forever. And say for instance, when a bad person or the person who had done bad things, having good thought at death will be born in a place of happiness. That doesn't mean that all his bad deeds have been erased.
Of course.
And they are, and they will come into effect. And also in the same way, when a good person dying, having a bad thought, will be born in a place of unhappiness. That is also not forever. And by being born there, all his good deeds have not been erased totally. What to talk about our next birth? Say for instance, if we take this present life, anytime if you have a bad thought, any moment, and you will suffer, and you will suffer tremendously of that thought, but not forever, and you will get over it sometime. In the same way, when one is born in a place of unhappiness, due to the bad thought at death, that person will get over it.
So everything changes. We're
Changes.
rather bedeviled, aren't we, by the idea that, a Catholic idea, I think frequently in its tradition, that, you know, you have to be, as it were, in a very good state at the end of your life, and that'll be your launching pad into certain salvation.
Yes, I think that again is not being said as much as it used to be
As
said.
it used to be said.
But it certainly was thought if you did not have the rites of passage, then you would not have passage. And those of us who were out of it were out of it.
Now, when a large minority of people in a newspaper survey said that they did believe in reincarnation, they were speaking in this culture, not in a Buddhist culture, do you feel something? I mean, do you respond in any way to the idea of being
Not in the slightest.
No wish?
No, not
feeling
at
you're
all.
going to be...
No. In the first place, I don't know what it is that would be reincarnated. What is this self who is the collection of the good and bad deeds? I think that has the same difficulties for me as a matter of identity as the notion of the soul, and that this self who some perhaps recording angel or something of the sort has added up all the pluses and minuses and then has translated into a life according to that. This, I find, it has no place for forgiveness, it seems to me, because you have to work your way through what it is you have done. And the Christian notions of grace, of something you don't deserve, but which God gives, aren't
Isn't
in
there?
them.
Yeah. In 30 seconds, could you explain how the accumulation of Dr. Page's deeds after she dies will gather round a new organism and be born? 30 seconds.
Well, because depending on these good thoughts, it will be born in a place of happiness. And if the dying thought provides you the good thought, exactly the same what I said in the early discussion, that will be born in place of happiness.
And a body will result from this and be born.
Not the body. And the body body will be dropped. It's the continuity of thought.
But a new body is then picked up.
Yes, that we say the rebirth, we say rebecoming. And people get confused when we talk about rebirth. It is a rebecoming. Rebecoming as, say, it is this force of thought. The continuing thought will take place, rebecoming in another birth.
Well, a point of great fascination. Thank you very, very much indeed, Dr. Page and Pandit Vajrayana. Well, that's the lid off one or two compartments of Pandora's box. with the help of a Buddhist, a Jew, a Christian, a Hindu, and a Muslim. And there, for the time being, the roundabout stops. Goodbye.